Why did they look at her like that? The briefing room smelled of burnt coffee and stale air, the kind of scent that clung to fatigue and long hours. A projector buzzed against the hum of the fluorescent lights, casting cold satellite images on the wall. Every man around the steel table leaned forward, scribbling in notepads or tracing fingers across the grainy outlines of a compound thousands of miles away. And her. She sat 2 chairs down from the end, spine straight, hands clasped, listening. She didn't fidget, didn't interrupt, didn't lean in the way the others did, but she felt the glances sideways, clipped, quick enough they thought she wouldn't notice. She always noticed. Deadweight. She'd heard it whispered once in training behind her back, when sweat burned her eyes and her rifle strap dug deep into her collarbone. The word had followed her. A curse. A sentence. And tonight, with the stakes higher than ever, she heard it again, not spoken, but hanging in the silence between breaths. The colonel cleared his throat. His hand slid a laser pointer across the projected map, circling the compound with deliberate, unhurried precision. "The mission is high risk," he said. His voice was gravel sharp from decades of command. "We insert at 200. Target compound is fortified. Multiple layers, reinforced gates. Intel suggests at least 4 separate guard rotations. Expect the unexpected. This team," his pause lingered, almost as if he too weighed the room's quiet divisions, "is all we've got." She tilted her head just enough to hide the twitch at the corner of her mouth. All we've got. Words meant to inspire unity. For her, they tasted different, hollow, fragile. Her eyes drifted to the far side of the projection, to the eastern edge of the wall. Her breath caught. Just a flicker, a seam in the stone, a corner burned into her memory like a scar that never healed. She knew it. She shouldn't have, but she did. Her jaw tightened, pulse quickening. The image blurred at the edges. She forced her gaze away before anyone could notice. Not here, not now. Beside her, Ramirez, barely out of his teens, face still soft beneath the uniform, leaned closer to another soldier and muttered. His voice was a low hiss, but in a room this quiet, nothing truly hid. She caught fragments, not the full sentence, but enough. The tone carried what the words didn't: dismissal, doubt, the kind of mocking edge sharpened by insecurity. Her shoulders stiffened. She almost ignored it, almost, but then a little louder. "Why bring her? She'll slow us down." The words lodged like shrapnel. Her fingers twitched under the table. She pressed her palm against her thigh until it hurt. Silence was a weapon she'd mastered, but tonight it felt like swallowing glass. The colonel snapped the briefing shut. "You've got your assignments. Gear check in 1 hour. Wheels up at 1:30. Dismissed." Chairs scraped. Boots echoed against the concrete floor. Men gathered their notes, their weapons, their chatter. She remained seated, eyes fixed on the map long after the projector dimmed and the hum of conversation bled into the hallway. Alone in the half-dark, she touched the band at her wrist. Black fabric, frayed at the edges, ordinary to anyone else. But beneath, pressed into her skin, was something else. A series of numbers etched in a language of pain and survival. If anyone had seen, maybe the whispers would have stopped. Maybe they would have frozen the way others once had. But no one saw, no one ever would. Not yet. The night air hit her like ice as she stepped outside. The tarmac stretched under floodlights, slick with a faint sheen of frost. Helicopters crouched in the distance, hulking shapes with blades still, waiting for orders to bring them to life. The smell of jet fuel hung sharp in the wind. She pulled her jacket tighter, adjusted her pack. The weight was familiar, comforting, like the steady pressure of something that never left you. Davis stood near a crate of gear, kneeling to check straps, his shadow bending long under the lights. He looked up when she approached. His eyes lingered for a second longer than most. Not cruel, not mocking, just searching, as though there was something in her silence he wanted to understand. "You ready?" His voice was flat, but there was something beneath it. A test, a measure. She nodded once, always. The words slid from her lips like instinct. carrying more weight than he could possibly know. Davis adjusted his rifle strap and stood. He was taller than most, shoulders broad, movement steady. "Good," he said. "You'll need to be." Their eyes locked for a beat, and in that silence she wondered if he saw it, the way her thumb hovered unconsciously near her wristband, like a reflex she couldn't unlearn. But he didn't ask. He just walked past, his silence heavier than words. The helicopter roared to life, blades chopping the air into a storm of sound and wind. They boarded quickly, packs thudding, weapons clattering. Inside, red lights bathed the cabin in shadows. Faces looked ghostly, half there, half gone. She sat against the cold metal wall, knees tucked in tight. Her fingers rested lightly on the edge of her rifle, but her eyes weren't on it. They were far away. A different flight, a different night. The memory came without warning, as it always did when the rotors spun and the world blurred into noise. Her brother's voice, steady, low, a whisper in the dark. "You'll get through this, you always do." Her throat tightened. She forced the memory back, but fragments remained, clinging like dust in her lungs. She hadn't told anyone why this mission wasn't just another line in a report, why the compound on that wall wasn't just another target. If they knew, maybe their glances would have changed. But secrets were safer when they stayed buried. The crew chief's voice cut through the noise. 2 minutes. Gloves tightened, weapons checked, jaws clenched. She looked up at the red glow of the cabin lights. Her pulse slowed, her breath steadied. Whatever waited below, she would face it. For him, for the promise she made that no one else would ever hear. The helicopter dipped, the ground rushed closer. She pressed her thumb to the hidden numbers on her wrist, etched reminders, a code, a weight heavier than steel. The ramp dropped. Cold night air ripped inside, biting her skin. Dust swirled in the rotor wash. Voices rose in clipped commands. And as she stepped out into the darkness, the old whisper echoed again. Deadweight. They had no idea. Not yet. The ground was hard beneath her boots. The night alive with silence, the kind that wasn't empty but waiting. Every sound seemed sharpened. The crunch of dirt, the faint jingle of gear, the rasp of breath inside masks. The team moved in formation, fanning out across the shadowed terrain. Precision drilled into muscle memory. But even here she felt it, the space they gave her. Not measured in feet, but in trust withheld. An invisible gap no training could close. Her breath fogged faintly in the cold. She pushed forward anyway, scanning the darkness with steady eyes. Her rifle tracked each shadow, each corner where danger might hide. And then she saw it. The eastern wall. Her chest constricted, stone layered upon stone, jagged and unforgiving. And there the seam, the scar in the masonry she remembered too well. Her throat went dry. She blinked slow, willing the memory down. Not here, not now. But it pressed anyway. The sound of shouting in another time, the smell of smoke, her brother's voice calling her name before silence swallowed everything. East wall secured, moving in. Ramirez's voice snapped through the comms, sharp, overeager, too loud. Her gaze locked on him, heart stuttering. He didn't know. None of them knew. That wall was not what it seemed. She wanted to shout, to stop him, but the words froze. To warn him would mean revealing what she shouldn't know, and if she did, everything she had buried would surface. So she swallowed it hard and kept moving. For now, what was he doing? The question hit her chest like a stone as she watched Ramirez step too close to the wall. His rifle lifted, steady enough, but his feet betrayed him. The eagerness of youth, the kind that forgets shadows have teeth. Her lungs locked for a second. She wanted to call out, to stop him, to grab his collar and yank him back. But all she did was take one slow breath, pressing the air deep, quiet, contained. Because to speak now was to confess. She knew that wall. She knew it in ways no satellite image or briefing could explain. The way the stone was darker near the base, the way the crack ran deeper than it looked, the way something beneath it hummed like a heartbeat. But if she warned them, if she said anything, they would ask how. And that was a question she couldn't afford to answer. So she moved with them, silent, eyes scanning, every nerve in her body a taut wire. Davis was point man, his silhouette cut sharp against the wall as he motioned with 2 fingers, low and quick. The team spread, forming a semicircle. Boots pressed into the dirt without sound. The compound loomed above them, stone and shadow stacked against the night sky. Ramirez crouched near the seam, gloved hands brushing the surface. She saw him lean closer, his helmet light flickering once across the uneven stone. Her stomach knotted. No, not there. Her pulse thudded in her ears, drowning the night's silence. She shifted, taking 2 steps toward him before she stopped herself. The urge clawed inside her, raw and desperate, but she froze it where it lived. Because if she broke now, if she let them see her knowing too much, the whispers would become more than whispers. The word deadweight would harden into something permanent. Ramirez. Davis's voice cut the tension, low and commanding. Eyes up, you're not sightseeing. Ramirez jolted, muttered an apology, and pulled back. His rifle rose again, though his posture betrayed the flush of embarrassment. She let the smallest breath escape, relief thin and fleeting. But it wasn't over, not even close. The climb began slow. Hooks and lines sank into stone, muscles strained, gloves scraped rough surfaces. One by one, the team scaled the wall, shadows shifting in rhythm. She waited her turn, her hands steady, her breathing even. When she finally placed her palms on the stone, the chill of it sank into her skin. Her fingers brushed that seam, that hidden scar in the wall, and for an instant the memory surged again, a flash of fire, the crack of splintering rock, the scream that never ended. Her grip faltered. For half a second her body threatened to betray her. But she clenched hard, teeth grinding, muscles locking. She pulled upward, 1 step, another. The stone bit into her gloves, grounding her. She climbed without looking down, without looking back. When she reached the top, Davis offered a hand. She ignored it, swinging her leg over and dropping lightly onto the roof's shadowed edge. His hand hovered in the air a second longer before he withdrew it. He said nothing. Neither did she. Inside the compound, the silence grew heavier. Every doorway a mouth, every window an eye. The air smelled faintly of oil and dust, sharp enough to burn her nostrils. The team moved like ghosts, rifles raised, boots soft against stone. She followed, senses alive. Her heart wasn't racing, not anymore. It had slowed into something colder, steadier. Fear had burned away, leaving only resolve. But inside, she felt the pull, a magnet tugging her toward something she hadn't named, toward a corner she hadn't seen in years, toward the truth she had locked away so tightly it threatened to split her ribs. And she wondered, just for a moment, if tonight was the night it would all come spilling out. Ramirez muttered again over comms. Clear left, nothing here. Keep it tight, Davis responded. His voice was quiet steel. We're not sightseeing. The phrase repeated, sharper this time. Ramirez bit back a reply. The silence that followed was thick, awkward. She felt it pressing down like weight. Davis's eyes flicked to her briefly as though testing. Did she hear it too? Did she think Ramirez was deadweight? She didn't. She knew what it was like to wear that word on your back, to feel it seep into every sideways glance. So she kept her silence and walked on. They stopped near a doorway. The paint was chipped, metal rusted, hinges bent from years of weather. Davis signaled and the breacher stepped forward, setting the charge low and clean. She felt her stomach twist. She knew this door. She shouldn't have, but she did. Her breath caught again. Her thumb brushed her wristband, an unconscious movement, a silent ritual. The numbers pressed against her skin, a reminder, a wound. The charge blew, the door cracked open. Smoke curled, the scent sharp and biting. The team surged inside. The interior was darker, the air heavier. Concrete walls closed tight around them, pressing in. She scanned corners, eyes sharp, rifle steady, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she had already walked these halls. Her boots echoed faintly. Her breath sounded too loud in her ears. Ramirez whispered nervously, "Feels like a tomb." She almost spoke, almost said, "You have no idea." But again, silence won. They cleared the first room, then another, empty. But as they moved deeper, something shifted. A sound, a scrape, the faintest shuffle of feet against concrete. The team froze, rifles lifted, hearts thudded. Davis raised his hand, signaling. They fanned out, slow, deliberate. Her pulse slowed again, cold, focused. She felt the weight of the moment pressing down. And in that silence, the memory returned, uninvited, unstoppable. The last time she was here, the night she lost him. Her brother's voice, his hand grabbing hers, shoving her toward the crack in the wall, his shout desperate, fierce. "Go now!" Then the blast, the stone splitting, the air choking with dust and fire, his scream cut short. Her throat tightened, her eyes burned, but she didn't flinch. Not now, not with lives depending on her silence. A shadow moved in the next room. The first shot cracked like lightning. The world exploded into chaos. Bullets tore the silence apart, sparks flared against walls, shouts echoed in the tight space. Boots pounded, bodies pressed against cover, the air filled with smoke, heat, metal. She moved without hesitation, rifle up, breath steady, every movement clean, precise. Her body remembered what her heart wanted to forget. Ramirez froze for a heartbeat too long. She yanked him sideways, her hand gripping his vest, dragging him behind cover just as a round tore the air where his head had been. His eyes widened, shock, fear, gratitude unspoken. She said nothing. She just kept firing. The fight ended as suddenly as it began. The last shot echoed, then faded into a silence so sharp it rang. Bodies lay still, smoke curled upward, stinging her eyes. Davis scanned, rifle raised, chest heaving. His gaze landed on her. For the first time, something in his eyes shifted, a question, maybe even respect. But before he could speak, she looked away. Her thumb brushed her wristband again, the numbers pressing cold against her skin. Because this wasn't over. Not for her. And as the team regrouped, breath ragged, gear rattling, she knew something none of them did. They thought this was the beginning of a mission. For her, it was the continuation of a vow. One she had made in blood. Why did silence always feel louder after gunfire? The team stood in the wreckage of the room, weapons still raised, ears ringing from the sudden storm. Smoke curled along the ceiling. Concrete dust drifted in thin ribbons through the beams of their helmet lights. Bodies lay scattered, unmoving, faceless, stripped of anything but the weight of their absence. Her rifle stayed steady a second longer before she lowered it. The metal still trembled faintly from recoil, her gloves damp with sweat. She could feel her pulse through the grip, steady now, controlled. It always steadied after the chaos, never before. "Clear," Davis's voice rasped, his tone low, harsh with command. The word traveled across the room like an order to breathe again. Boots shuffled. Safety catches clicked faintly. The team began to reset, their rhythm pulling them back into formation. But her eyes didn't leave the far corner. The shadow there, the way it bent against the wall, tugged at her. She knew that corner. She had stood there before. She could still hear the echo of another night, another voice, a warning that had come too late. Her hand brushed her wristband. The numbers pressed cold against her skin. She blinked once, forcing herself back to the present. Not here, not now. Ramirez knelt by one of the fallen. His breath came quick, too loud. He pressed a hand against his knee as though steadying himself. The boy had survived the firefight, but survival came with its own ghosts. "Kid, keep your head up," muttered Harris, the breacher, his voice rough but not unkind. "Don't stare too long, doesn't help." Ramirez swallowed, nodded quickly, and rose, his face pale under the red glow. His eyes flicked briefly to her, the woman he had doubted, dismissed, mocked under his breath, the one who had just pulled him out of the line of fire. He didn't thank her, not yet, but something in his gaze had shifted. She gave him nothing in return, no nod, no reassurance. Silence was safer. Davis motioned them onward. His jaw was tight, eyes sharp, but she noticed the way his hand lingered a second too long on the wall as he passed. He had felt it too, the weight of what lingered here. The compound wasn't empty. It wasn't just stone and shadows. It held something deeper, something hidden, and she knew that better than anyone. But she couldn't tell them, not yet. The next corridor narrowed, concrete walls closing like a throat. Their footsteps echoed faintly, the sound of breath harsh in the helmets. Every corner felt alive, every doorway waiting to split open. She walked third in line, enough distance to see ahead, enough space to cover the rear. Her rifle tracked each flicker of movement, her mind locked in a rhythm of breaths and steps. But inside, her thoughts drifted where she didn't want them to. Her brother's face. The night he pushed her toward the crack in the wall, the weight of his hand, rough and urgent, shoving her into survival. His eyes dark, furious, determined before the blast swallowed him whole. She had never told them. She had never told anyone. Not about him. Not about the vow she made when she crawled out from under the rubble and pressed her shaking hands against the numbers burned into her wrist. Find them, finish it. Her chest ached. She blinked hard, forcing the memory back. But the vow remained, it always did. A door loomed ahead, metal bolted. The team halted. Davis raised a hand, signaling silence. The breacher stepped forward, setting charges with steady fingers. Ramirez hovered too close until Harris shoved him back with a muttered curse. She stood still, breathing slow. The air tasted like dust and rust, sharp enough to sting her tongue. When the door blew, the sound cracked the night wide open. Shrapnel clattered across the floor, smoke curling outward. They surged inside. The room beyond was larger, darker, a warehouse of sorts. Crates stacked high, covered in tarps. The smell of oil and metal thickened, coating her throat. Lights, Davis's command was quick, curt. Beams cut through the dark, slicing the room into sharp angles. Shadows stretched tall across the walls. She scanned quickly. Corners, ceilings, crates. Her rifle followed her eyes, precise and unshaking. Ramirez muttered, "What is this place?" No one answered. Because she knew. Her stomach clenched as her eyes fell on a single crate near the back. The way it sat slightly crooked. The way dust gathered unevenly at its base. She knew because she had hidden behind that very crate once, a trembling figure in the middle of chaos. And behind it. Her throat tightened. She forced herself to look away before her feet betrayed her. "Check it," Davis pointed. Two men moved toward the crooked crate. Her hand lifted slightly, an instinct to stop them. She froze halfway, fingers twitching in the air. They didn't see, they didn't hear. The men pulled the tarp. The crate groaned as they shifted it. Dust billowed. And then the faint click. "Down," she shouted, the word tearing from her throat before she could stop it. The blast came a heartbeat later. The floor shook, heat flared. The world cracked open in a roar of fire and dust. Bodies hit the ground, thrown by the force. Her ears rang. Her chest slammed against concrete. Silence followed, a silence filled with ringing, with dust, with pain. She coughed, pulling herself up, her gloves coated in grit. Her vision blurred, but her instincts were sharper than ever. She had known, she hadn't warned them, not fully, and now. Her chest ached with guilt sharper than shrapnel. Davis was on one knee, blood trickling down his temple, his rifle still clutched tight. His eyes found hers through the haze. How did you know?" His voice rasped, low, edged with suspicion. She froze, her lips parted, but the words stuck in her throat. The truth balanced on the edge of her tongue. But before she could speak, another sound rose. Shout's footsteps, the enemy had heard. Gunfire ripped through the haze. The team scrambled, diving for cover, returning fire in bursts of light and thunder. The air filled with smoke, heat, chaos. She moved without thought, rifle steady, eyes sharp, each shot clean, each movement precise. Her silence didn't matter now, survival did. But in the corner of her vision she saw Davis still watching her, not just her aim, not just her survival. Watching the way she had shouted before the blast, watching the way she seemed to know the walls better than anyone. Watching the secret she carried begin to crack. The fight dragged on, brutal and close. Bullets sparked against metal crates. Dust stung eyes and lungs. Shouts turned to gasps, grunts, curses. Ramirez fired wildly, panic leaking into his aim. She caught his shoulder, steadying him, forcing his rifle down into control. His breath came in ragged bursts, but he nodded, grounding himself in her calm. For a moment their eyes met, and in his she saw it, the shift from doubt to something else. Respect, maybe, or simply survival recognizing survival. She said nothing, she just fired again. The last enemy fell, the final echo faded. The warehouse stilled. The team gathered, breathless, battered, alive. But the silence wasn't relief. It was heavier now, thick with questions. Davis wiped blood from his brow, his gaze locking on her again. This time he didn't look away. Neither did she. The numbers on her wrist burned against her skin. And she knew the secret wouldn't stay hidden much longer. Why did the aftermath of battle always feel heavier than the fight itself? The warehouse smelled of burnt metal and smoke, the air still thick with the residue of gunpowder. Faint dust motes drifted down from the shattered ceiling beams. The team moved slowly, their breaths ragged, their boots crunching over broken wood, twisted metal, and the still forms that would never rise again. They were alive, but only just. Davis stood tall despite the blood on his brow, his weapon still clutched like an extension of his arm. His gaze never left her, not even as he barked orders to the others. The way he looked at her now was different. It wasn't doubt. It wasn't dismissal. It was something heavier, suspicion. She ignored it. She always did. She had carried suspicion like a second skin her whole life. Instead, she crouched, checking Ramirez's shoulder where shrapnel had grazed him. His jaw clenched against the sting, but his eyes no longer carried the arrogance of earlier. They carried something else now, unease, yes, but also recognition. "You're good," she said quietly, her voice low enough that only he heard. He swallowed, nodded, and for once didn't argue. The team regrouped in the far corner of the warehouse, where the enemy's last line had fallen. The air still quivered faintly, as if the walls themselves remembered the blast. Davis knelt by the destroyed crate, brushing ash away with his glove. Beneath the shattered wood, scraps of metal gleamed faintly, twisted but still recognizable. "Explosives," Harris muttered, crouching beside him. "Homemade but strong enough, rigged as a trap." Davis's eyes narrowed. "They wanted us dead before we even made it this far." His gaze flicked to her again. She felt it like a weight pressing against her ribs. She said nothing, because she knew better than anyone that this wasn't just a trap. This was a message. And the message wasn't meant for the team. It was meant for her. The silence stretched until Davis finally broke it. "How did you know?" His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air sharper than any bullet. The others froze. Ramirez shifted uncomfortably. Harris's eyes narrowed. Even the medic, O'Neill, paused mid-bandage to glance up. All of them waiting. Her throat tightened. The truth clawed at her chest, desperate to be free. But the vow she had carried all her life pressed heavier. Silence wasn't just survival, it was protection. "I didn't," she said flatly. "Instinct, that's all." Her voice didn't waver, her face didn't crack. But Davis's eyes stayed locked on hers. searching, peeling back layers she didn't want uncovered. Finally, he gave a short nod, but it wasn't acceptance. It was postponement. And postponement was dangerous. The mission wasn't over. They still had to push deeper into the compound's heart. The maps said little. Intelligence had given them fragments, whispers of storage rooms, tunnels, and a command post hidden beneath. But maps and whispers weren't enough. She knew because she had walked these corridors before. Not as a soldier, not as part of any team, but as a child clutching her brother's hand, running through smoke and screams. The memory pressed at her temples as they moved, as the walls seemed to close in around her. She forced her breath steady. She forced her boots to march in rhythm with theirs. Not now, not here. But every corner brought her closer to the place she feared most. The tunnels stretched downward, deeper into the earth. Damp concrete walls sweated with moisture. The air grew heavier, staler, tinged with mold. Their flashlights cut narrow beams through the dark, glinting off pipes that groaned faintly above. Each step echoed too loudly. Ramirez muttered under his breath, "Feels like a grave." No one answered, but they all felt it. She walked third again, her rifle steady, her ears straining against the silence. But her chest tightened with each turn, each stare downward. Because she remembered the screams echoing here once. She remembered the cold floor beneath her knees as she crawled, desperate, searching for her brother's voice. She remembered the way the air had choked her then, just as it choked her now. Her hand brushed her wristband, feeling the cold press of the numbers. She would not break, not yet. They reached another door, rusted, heavy, locked. Davis signaled Harris forward again. The breacher moved quickly, setting the charge with hands that had done it 100 times before. But this time her heart thudded harder. She knew what was behind that door. The last time it opened, her brother's blood had stained the floor. She clenched her jaw. The blast tore the hinges, the door groaned open. And the room beyond yawned wide, dark, waiting. The smell hit her first. Not smoke, not gunpowder, something fouler, something that clung to skin and refused to wash away. The beam of her light swept across the room. Chains hung from the walls, stained floors, splintered furniture. Ramirez gagged softly. Harris cursed under his breath. It wasn't just a room, it was a cage. And she knew she had been here before. Her stomach twisted, bile rising. She forced her face into stone. The team couldn't see, they couldn't know. But the images flickered anyway. Her brother's hands raw from chains, his voice breaking as he told her to run, his eyes still burning, even as the world tried to snuff them out. Her chest ached so hard she thought it might crack. Davis's voice cut through, "Search it." The team moved reluctantly, their lights sweeping the corners, their boots crunching on old debris. She didn't move. Her feet felt nailed to the ground. Until Davis's gaze found her again, sharp, demanding. Her body obeyed before her heart could protest. She moved, slow, steady, scanning the walls she already knew by memory. Her light caught on something near the far corner, a mark etched into the concrete, faint, almost invisible. Numbers. The same as on her wristband. Her breath hitched. She stumbled back a half step, her chest heaving. But she caught herself, straightened, lowered her light quickly before anyone else noticed. No one could see. Not yet. The team regrouped, unsettled. Ramirez muttered about ghosts. Harris cursed again, sharper this time. O'Neill checked his kit as though the silence itself wounded him. Davis studied the room longer than anyone. His hand brushed against the chains, his jaw clenched. Finally he turned, motioning them onward. But as they filed out, his eyes found her once more. And in them she saw it not just suspicion, not just command. Recognition. The tunnels grew tighter, darker. Their lights flickered against damp walls. The air pressed heavy, suffocating. The team moved slower now. the weight of what they had seen dragging at their steps. But she moved differently. Her chest burned with every breath. Her wristband felt like a brand against her skin. Her vow pounded in her ears louder than gunfire. The numbers on the wall weren't random. They weren't coincidence. They were calling her deeper. And she knew, with a certainty sharper than instinct. The heart of this place wasn't just their mission. It was hers. And when they reached it, silence would no longer be enough. Why did every step feel like a countdown? The deeper they went, the more the earth seemed to press down on them, stone and soil and silence merging into a weight none of them could shake. The tunnel stretched endlessly, the ceiling dripping condensation, every drop echoing like a metronome of dread. Their lights cut thin beams through the dark, but the shadows pressed closer, thicker, as if they resisted the intrusion. She walked in rhythm with the team, her boots steady, her weapon raised, but inside she was fracturing. Every corner they turned, every stair they descended, pulled her closer to a truth she had spent years burying. And she wasn't sure she could keep it hidden much longer. Ramirez broke the silence first. He always did. His nerves were too restless for silence. This place, his voice was hushed, almost reverent, feels like we're walking through the ribs of something that died a long time ago. Harris grunted, "Keep your poetry to yourself, kid." But no one laughed. Even Davis didn't snap back with the usual bark. The air here didn't allow it. She glanced at Ramirez. For the first time she saw the cracks in his bravado. Sweat darkened his collar. His eyes flicked too often to the shadows. And she understood. Because she felt the same. Only her fear wasn't about what might be waiting. It was about what she already knew was here. The tunnel opened suddenly into another chamber. This one wider, lower, the ceiling barely high enough to stand upright. Pipes lined the walls, dripping rust and grease. A faint hum vibrated in the air, mechanical, alive. "Generators," Harris muttered, sweeping his light. "Old but still running." The hum wasn't just sound, it was pulse, it was breath. It meant the heart of this place wasn't dead. It was waiting. Davis motioned them to spread out. His voice was low but sharp. "Check for traps, they knew we were coming." They moved slowly, carefully. Every object, every shadow, a potential deception. She scanned the floor, the walls, the corners. Her light caught something faint, wires, almost invisible, trailing along the edge of a pipe. Her breath stilled. She raised her hand, signaling. Harris moved in, crouched, traced the wire with careful fingers. He cursed under his breath. Pressure rig, old design, but effective. Ramirez muttered, "One wrong step and we'd be picking ourselves off the ceiling." Davis nodded once, "Disarm it." Harris's hands worked steady, precise, while the rest of them held their breath. But she didn't watch the wires. She watched the wall behind them. Because scratched faintly into the metal surface, almost lost beneath layers of rust, were more numbers. The same pattern as before, the same as her wrist. Her stomach twisted. It wasn't coincidence, it wasn't chance. Whoever had left them here had meant for her to find them. The charge clicked safely into Harris's hand. He exhaled, wiped sweat from his brow. Clear. The team moved on, relief brief, fragile. But her eyes stayed on the numbers long after the others had passed. She traced them lightly with her glove just once, before forcing herself away. If Davis saw, if any of them saw, the questions would begin again. And this time, she wasn't sure she had the strength to lie. They pressed deeper. The tunnel narrowed again until they were walking single file. The walls seemed to close in, rough stone scraping against their shoulders. Every sound magnified, the drip of water, the creak of boots, the rasp of breathing. And beneath it all, a silence too heavy to be natural. A silence that listened. Her chest tightened. Her brother's voice echoed faintly in her memory. "Don't stop running." She had. And now she was here again. Another door, heavier this time, reinforced steel. Davis raised his fist, signaling halt. He studied it, his jaw set. "This is it," he murmured, not loud, not certain, but enough. The team tensed, weapons ready. Her palms sweated inside her gloves. Her throat burned with words she couldn't speak. Because she knew what was behind that door. Not from instinct, not from training. From memory. Harris stepped forward with the breaching kit. His hands moved quick, practiced. But her body rebelled. Every nerve screamed. She took a step forward. "Wait." The word slipped before she could stop it. The team froze. Harris looked back, startled. Ramirez frowned. O'Neill's brow furrowed. But Davis's eyes narrowed. "What do you see?" His voice was calm, too calm. She forced her breath steady, forced her hands not to tremble. "Listen," she whispered. They did. At first only silence, then faint, barely there, a mechanical click repeating at irregular intervals. Harris's eyes widened. Secondary trigger, motion sensor, would have cooked us soon as the door blew. The team stiffened. Ramirez muttered a curse under his breath. Davis's gaze never left her. "How did you hear it?" His question wasn't curiosity, it was challenge. She met his eyes, steady, cold. "Because I listen." Silence stretched, heavy. Then Davis gave a short nod. "Disarm it." Harris moved back in, careful, sweating more now that he knew the trap's teeth. Minutes stretched into eternities. Finally he leaned back, exhaled, clear. The door groaned open, and the air that spilled out was colder than death. The room beyond wasn't wide, it wasn't grand. It was worse. Concrete walls, a single table bolted to the floor, chains, shackles, stains that no time could erase. And on the far wall, a board covered in photographs. Faces. Men, women, children. Some crossed out, some not. Ramirez's voice broke. "What the hell is this?" No one answered. Because the truth was too heavy to speak. Her legs moved before she could think, carrying her closer. Her eyes scanned the photos, her chest heaving. And there near the center, a boy's face. Her brother. Younger, eyes burning. Her knees buckled. She caught herself on the table, her fingers digging into the cold metal. Her breath tore out of her lungs, ragged, sharp. O'Neill started to move toward her, concern etched across his face. But Davis stopped him with a hand. Because Davis wasn't just watching her now. He was putting it together. She forced herself upright, forced her face blank. But her hands still trembled. The vow thundered in her ears. Silence, always silence. Yet the wall of photographs burned through every barrier she had built. This wasn't just memory. This was proof. Proof that her brother had been here. Proof that whoever had run this place had known her, had marked her. Proof that the numbers on her wrist weren't just scars. They were a code. A code that bound her to this place, this mission, whether she spoke it aloud or not. Her eyes closed for a heartbeat. She swallowed the scream clawing at her throat. And when she opened them again, her face was stone. "Clear the room," she said softly. Her voice didn't shake. But inside, everything was breaking. The team moved on, unsettled, shaken. Ramirez avoided looking at the wall of photos. Harris muttered curses as though words alone could shield him. O'Neill lingered, his hand brushing the table, his eyes heavy with pity he didn't voice. But Davis's gaze lingered on her longer than anyone's. He didn't ask, not yet. But his silence spoke louder than questions. Because he knew now. And sooner or later, he would demand the truth. As they descended deeper into the compound, the tunnels closing tighter, the air pressing heavier, she felt the inevitability of it pressing with them. She had carried her secret like a shield her whole life. But shields cracked. And hers was already splintering. Ahead, the tunnel bent, disappearing into blackness. Her brother's voice whispered in her memory, "Don't stop running." But she wasn't running anymore. She was walking straight into the heart of the past. And when the truth finally surfaced, it wouldn't just change the mission. It would decide who walked out alive. Why did silence feel louder than gunfire? The tunnel pressed in tighter as they moved forward, stones scraping against their shoulders, dampness dripping from above. Their flashlights cut thin slices through the dark, but every beam seemed swallowed, devoured by the black. Each step sounded like betrayal. Every breath was too sharp, too loud. And inside her chest, her heart pounded in uneven rhythms, like it was keeping time with a memory she didn't want to remember. Ramirez whispered, "Feels like the earth choking us." "Shut it," Harris muttered, his tone clipped, but even he didn't sound convinced of his own steadiness. O'Neill's voice floated from the back, softer, almost prayer-like. "You ever think about how we'll be remembered if we don't walk out of here?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Ramirez laughed nervously. "I'd settle for being remembered at all." No one else answered, because the truth was, none of them wanted to imagine their names scratched into stone or buried in a file somewhere forgotten. But she thought about it. She thought about how memory worked, not in files or records, but in scars, in numbers etched into skin, in vows whispered in the dark. She thought about her brother's face on that wall of photographs, half hidden, half erased. Would anyone else remember him? Or was she the last? The tunnel widened abruptly, spilling them into another chamber. It was colder here, the kind of cold that clung to bone. The air smelled faintly of iron. And the walls were lined with lockers, metal dented, rusted, but intact. Davis raised his hand, signaling halt. He scanned slowly, every movement deliberate. His jaw tightened. "Check them," he ordered. Harris moved first, cautious, his weapon steady. Ramirez followed, reluctant. O'Neill hovered closer to the entrance, his nerves plain. She didn't move, because she knew these lockers. Not these exact ones, but the kind. As a child, she had seen her captors pull weapons, tools, chains from lockers just like these. She had heard the clang of metal doors opening, closing, sealing fates inside. Her stomach twisted, her throat burned. But she forced herself forward anyway. Because if she faltered now, they would see. And she couldn't let them see. Harris yanked one locker open. Inside, empty, save for dust and scraps of cloth. Another more empty space. Ramirez muttered, "This is a waste." But then his hand froze on the third door. Because inside, hanging neatly on hooks, were uniforms, not theirs, enemies, clean, folded with precision. And on the floor beneath them, boots, child-sized. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ramirez's mouth opened, then closed. His bravado had no words left. O'Neill swallowed audibly, his eyes dark. Harris muttered something sharp under his breath, but even he didn't sound like himself. Davis stepped forward slowly, his eyes scanning, his jaw tight. His gaze flicked briefly to her. And she froze, because she knew what he was thinking. And he was right. This wasn't just an enemy hideout. It was a place that consumed children. It was the place that had consumed her. She turned away quickly, forcing her breath steady, forcing her face blank. But her wrist burned beneath the band. The numbers etched into her skin weren't just reminders. They were inventory. Her chest clenched so hard it hurt. She pressed the butt of her rifle against her shoulder, grounding herself in the weight. Focus, mission, survival. Nothing else. The team moved on, slower now, heavier. The lockers had taken something from them, even if none of them said it. Ramirez didn't speak again. Harris's usual curses faded into silence. O'Neill's hands fidgeted endlessly, bandages and tools shifting as though motion alone kept him sane. And Davis was too quiet, his eyes too sharp, his steps too precise. He wasn't just leading. He was calculating. And she knew every calculation now included her. The tunnel sloped downward, deeper still. The hum of machinery grew louder, not constant but pulsing like the slow beat of a heart. It rattled through the walls, through the floor, through their chests. Every step closer, her breath grew shorter, because she knew what lay ahead. Not exactly, not precisely, but enough. The heart of this place wasn't just steel and concrete. It was memory. Her memory. They reached another door, bigger, reinforced, almost ceremonial in its weight. Davis raised his fist, halting them. He studied it carefully. Then quietly he spoke. "This is the last one." No one argued, because they all felt it too. Harris moved with the breaching kit, his hands steady but slower this time, as if the weight of the mission pressed harder with each step. Ramirez covered him, his rifle up but his eyes flicking nervously. O'Neill hovered near Davis, his lips moving silently, maybe prayer, maybe memory. She stood apart, her breath sharp, her body taut. Every nerve screamed that opening this door wasn't just mission. It was revelation. It was the end of her silence. Harris placed the charge, stepped back. Davis raised his hand. 3 fingers, 2, 1. The blast shook the tunnel, dust raining from the ceiling. The door groaned, buckled, crashed inward. And the chamber beyond was revealed. It was vast. Ceiling high, walls wide, machinery humming with eerie life. Rows of consoles, crates stacked neatly, screens still glowing faintly, powered by generators humming below. And in the center, a single chair bolted to the floor. Chains dangling from its arms. Stained. Empty. The team froze. O'Neill whispered, "God." Ramirez muttered something choked, his weapon trembling slightly. Harris's jaw clenched, his eyes scanning furiously, looking for something, anything that wasn't what it was. But there was no denying it. This wasn't just a base. It was a command post. A prison. An execution ground. Her legs moved on their own, carrying her closer to the chair. Each step dragged her deeper into memory. She could hear it faint, echoing the sound of chains rattling, the sound of screams swallowed by concrete. She could see it, her brother's face etched with pain, etched with fire. And she could feel it, his hand pressing hers, his voice whispering, "Run." Her knees almost buckled. She gripped the chair to steady herself. The cold metal burned her palms. And in that moment she knew. This was where he had died. Her breath tore out of her chest, ragged, sharp. The vow shattered inside her. Silence had been her shield. But silence here was betrayal. Her brother's memory wasn't chains. It was fire. And she couldn't bury it any longer. She turned slowly. The team was watching her. Ramirez's confusion, Harris's suspicion, O'Neill's pity. And Davis's eyes locked onto her wrist. Onto the band. Onto the truth. The chamber's silence deepened, pressing harder than stone. She didn't move, didn't speak. Because she knew the next words would change everything. But before she could open her mouth, before the truth could tear free, a voice crackled through the chamber. A speaker hidden in the walls. Low, mocking. "You came back." Her blood froze. Because she knew that voice. It belonged to the man who had taken her brother. And he wasn't gone. He was here. Watching. Waiting. The voice slithered through the chamber like smoke, curling into every shadow, coating every wall. "You came back." The words were not loud, but they didn't need to be. They carried the kind of weight that pulled at bone, the kind of venom that poisoned silence. Her stomach turned to stone, her breath hitched. Because she knew that voice. It was the voice that haunted every nightmare, the voice that whispered through her scars, the voice that had laughed when her brother screamed. The man who had branded her with numbers. The man who had promised she would never escape. The others reacted instantly. Ramirez jerked his rifle up, eyes wide, searching for the source. Where the hell? Harris spun, scanning every corner, every flicker of light. Contact, where is he? O'Neill's hands trembled as he fumbled with his gear, his mouth moving but no sound coming. Davis didn't move. He just looked at her. And in his eyes there wasn't shock. There wasn't confusion. There was recognition. The voice chuckled, low, amused. I wondered which of you would crawl into my hollow. I didn't expect her to lead you here. Her pulse exploded in her ears. The chamber seemed to tilt. No, no, no. She hadn't led them here. She had followed, obeyed, endured. But to him, it was all the same. Ramirez frowned, confused. What's he talking about? Harris's suspicion sharpened like a blade. His glare snapped to her. You know this voice. Her lips parted but no sound came. Her throat locked. Because the truth wasn't a sentence. It was a flood. And once it spilled, there would be no pulling it back. The voice filled the silence again. Still wearing the band, I see, hiding your gift. Did you tell them how many nights you screamed? How many times you begged? Her hands trembled. Her knees threatened to give way. But she forced herself upright, every muscle stiff, every breath jagged. She wouldn't bow, not now, not ever again. Harris's voice cut sharp through the tension. What the hell is going on? Davis didn't answer. He didn't even blink. Because he already knew. He had known from the moment he saw her hesitate at the lockers, from the way her eyes had lingered on the chair. He had been waiting for confirmation. And now he had it. Her chest burned with the weight of choice. She could lie, pretend, push the truth back into the pit where she had buried it. But the voice, his voice, had already pulled it into the light. Her silence wasn't protection anymore. It was surrender. And she refused to surrender. She pulled the band from her wrist. The cloth slipped free, exposing the scar beneath. Numbers burned deep into flesh. Ramirez's eyes widened. What the? O'Neill froze, his breath caught, horror dawning across his face. Harris spat a curse, his grip on the rifle tightening. And Davis just exhaled slowly. Like he had been waiting for this moment all along. The voice purred. There she is, my little number, my survivor. Her stomach twisted, rage clawing its way out of her chest. She remembered her brother's voice, steady, unbroken, even when they broke everything else. He hadn't died for her silence. He had died for her fire. She raised her rifle, her voice cutting sharp through the chamber. Show yourself. The laughter came again, rolling, mocking. Oh, I will, but first let them see who you truly are. The lights above flickered, then blazed to life. The chamber was drenched in harsh white. And on the far wall, screens blinked awake. Images filled them, grainy footage distorted but clear enough. A girl shackled screaming, branded. Her younger broken. Her scars laid bare for the world. Ramirez stumbled back, his face pale. Jesus Christ. O'Neill turned away, bile rising in his throat. Harris stared silent, his eyes hard, unreadable. And Davis didn't look away. He watched every second, every scream, every wound. Not with pity, not with disgust, but with something colder. Calculation. Her chest heaved, rage and shame colliding, burning her from the inside. She wanted to shoot the screens, shatter them, erase the girl she had been. But she didn't, because erasing her meant erasing him. Her brother, his sacrifice, His fire. No, she would not erase it. She would wield it. She tore her gaze from the screens, locking onto her team. Her voice shook, but it was steel. Yes, that was me. Ramirez blinked, his voice barely a whisper. They did that to you. O'Neill's eyes glistened, his voice raw. You survived that. Harris's jaw worked, his words sharp. And you never told us. The silence crashed like a hammer. Until Davis spoke. She didn't tell us, because it wasn't her secret to share. All eyes snapped to him. But Davis didn't flinch. His gaze was fixed on her, sharp, piercing. And beneath it, she saw something she hadn't expected. Not sympathy. Not anger. Respect. The voice snarled, sharp now, no longer amused. She belongs to me. You can dress her in your uniform, call her your soldier, but she will always be mine. Her grip on the rifle tightened, her teeth clenched. She stepped forward, fire blazing in her chest. No, I belong to him. The words cracked, raw and ragged. But they were true. Not to the monster in the walls. To her brother. To the memory of his voice, his fire, his defiance. She wasn't the number he had given her. She was the fire her brother had left behind. The speakers hissed, crackled, then fell silent. The chamber throbbed with the hum of machines. Every second stretched taut, brittle. Then footsteps. From the shadows beyond the far consoles, a figure emerged. Tall, broad. The years had carved lines into his face, but his eyes burned the same as they had when she was a child. Cruel, cold, endless. The man who had taken everything. And now he was here. Smiling. Welcome home. Her rifle snapped up, locked on his chest. Her hands didn't tremble. Not anymore. Because this wasn't just a mission. It wasn't just survival. It was reckoning. And she wasn't afraid. Not of him. Not of the truth. Not anymore. The silence was suffocating. The man stood there, framed in the harsh light, every scar on his face a map of cruelty, every line carved by years of power he should never have held. His presence filled the chamber, heavy as smoke, poisonous as gas. And yet she did not flinch. Her rifle leveled steady against his chest, her breathing shallow, controlled, her heart pounding, yes, but not with fear. With rage. With fire. The same fire her brother had died with. You should have died in that chair, the man sneered, his voice dripping with venom. You were nothing, a failure, deadweight. You think wearing their patch makes you strong. His lips curled into a cruel smile. You are still mine. The words stabbed into her, each one aimed at the scars carved into her skin. But this time they didn't sink. They broke. Because she was no longer the girl chained to a chair. She was a soldier. She was fire. Behind her the squad shifted. Ramirez's rifle trembled in his hands, his mouth dry, whispering under his breath. Jesus Christ. O'Neill's jaw clenched, tears burning at the corners of his eyes, his hands fighting not to shake. Harris said nothing. His gaze was locked on her, his expression stone, but his stance had softened. He wasn't holding her at gunpoint anymore. And Davis didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. He was watching her. Not the man. Not the screens. Her. As if the outcome of this moment was already written in her eyes. The man spread his arms, mocking, taunting. Go ahead, pull the trigger, end me, but know this. He tapped his chest, slow, deliberate. I am not just one man. I am the chain, the system, the order. Kill me and 10 more will take my place. Kill me and you remain what I made you, a weapon. His smile widened, cruel. And you will never escape me. Her finger curled tighter on the trigger. For a heartbeat, the chamber seemed to spin. her body trembling, her mind drowning in echoes of his voice, of her brother's scream, of the endless nights of silence. And then clarity. Not loud, not sharp. Just a whisper. Her brother's voice in memory. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Her breath caught, her chest burned. She steadied her aim. And she spoke, her voice ragged, breaking but full. "You're right, I'll never escape you, because you'll never leave me, but you don't own me anymore." Her finger squeezed. The shot cracked. The man staggered, surprise flashing in his eyes. Then rage. Then nothing. He crumpled, a puppet with its strings cut, crashing against the cold floor. The chamber rang with the echo, sharp and final. The screens flickered, then died, one by one, until only darkness remained. Her rifle lowered slowly, her breath ragged, her arms heavy. The silence that followed wasn't relief. It was weight. A weight that pressed down on her chest, on her shoulders, on every scar she carried. She had pulled the trigger. But the chain wasn't gone. It never would be. Behind her, Ramirez finally exhaled, his voice a broken whisper. "Holy hell." O'Neill swallowed hard, his voice cracking. "It's over." Harris shook his head, grim, eyes locked on the lifeless body. "It's never over, but it's done." And Davis. Davis stepped closer, his hand brushing her shoulder, steady, grounding. "You did what no one else could." His words were soft, but they carried weight. The kind of weight that didn't crush. The kind that anchored. She turned to him, her eyes wet, her throat tight. "I didn't do it for me." "I know," he said quietly. And in that silence, she knew he understood. The squad regrouped, weary, shaken, broken in ways that couldn't be patched by medics or stitched with thread. They moved through the chamber, clearing corners, searching for intel. But her mind wasn't on the mission anymore. It was on the empty chair. The screens. The voice that no longer existed. And the fire that still burned inside her. Hours later, when the extraction bird touched down and the desert wind howled through the night, she stood apart from the others. The stars burned cold above her, indifferent, eternal. And she thought of him. Her brother. His defiance, his fire, his voice. He hadn't lived to see this day. But maybe, in some way, he had given it to her. She lifted her wrist, staring at the scar, the numbers that would never fade. She didn't hide them anymore. Didn't cover them. They weren't chains. They were memory. They were fire. They were hers. When the rotors thundered and the squad climbed aboard, she lingered for a moment longer, the desert air whipping her hair, stinging her eyes. And she whispered into the wind, "Thank you." Then she stepped into the bird, the door slamming shut behind her. The ground fell away. The compound shrank into darkness. And the silence that followed was not emptiness. It was dignity. It was fire. It was hers. The narrator's voice would soften here, thoughtful, lingering. Sometimes scars do not fade, they remind us, they mark us, they stay with us, but they do not define us. She was called weak, she was called deadweight, she was branded, broken, forgotten. And yet she carried her fire into the dark. And when the time came, she did not speak it, she lived it, she acted, she endured. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And the screen would fade to black, holding only the faint hum of rotor blades, then silence. A silence that would linger. A silence that would say more than words ever could.